welcome to step 20. Now this one has had me a little perplexed. That's why there's been a little bit of delay in me putting this out. But let's take a look at how well our attachment of the cab to the body went. Am I going to be able to pull this off? That pulls off there just fine, and then the back pulls off. So nothing got glued on, but now I know that this is going to be rock solid on the chassis when it's put on. Yep, slips right back on, no problem. So that worked out well. I can remove the lower body now. So what this is involving is making the roof. However, I don't want the roof to be permanently attached since I'm going to be working on this later. So I'm starting by dry fitting some of the components. So here we have this framework, this lattice work, I guess you'd call it, and put that in just to see how that fits. Now, I'm not expecting that this is going to be perfect just because of the nature, but yeah, that fit in there really, really nice. So I'm happy with that. What I want to do eventually is to add the photo etched piece here. This is PEMA2. I want to add this piece to just the framework, so then later on this can just be placed right on there as a solid setup. However, we need to do a few things first. The way that this is set up right here, we want to glue this interior, I'm going to call it the air conditioner unit, even though it's probably more than that. But you can see it's got dials set up on the front and the fans inside, air conditioning, whatever. Okay, that fits fine. Just got to glue it together. And then I'm going to glue that to the framework. And that should also add a little bit of extra stability to the internal framework, which is, as you can see, really thin plastic. And that can be a little difficult to work with. So I've got that. Now there is a little bit of give, so make sure that you've got these parts on the way you want. Okay. Now, how does this all work out? Well, you can see that there are larger and smaller squares. It appears, from what I'm looking at, that this all goes like this. And so this, with the cross bracing underneath, should fit right like that. Boom. Rather than get too much glue everywhere, what I'm going to do is just run the glue through the cross brace pieces like that. Stick it on there. Let that start to solidify and harden up. Now, rather than going right onto this, which is going to be one of the big things, what I want to do next is take care of some of the other smaller parts. Here's F14 right here. I want to glue this right in here, just so you can see. Dry fit it first, make sure it's actually going to fit. And I'm not 100% sure how it's supposed to fit, because even though there's a spot here, it doesn't quite reach or act, or I guess that's how it is it's got that kind of odd shape. It kind of sticks out. Now the front slopes down, but the back piece is flush, so I'm gonna call it good. And that's, something that you run across with models sometimes, is that the prototype has some unusual features. Maybe you're not familiar with it. You know, I would imagine that anybody who, say, had served on an M1070 would probably know this already from, say, opening up the hood and looking at it or something like that. So in that case, I'm the unusual one instead of the kid. But if that's, you know, that might be how somebody else might know that that's how that goes. Next, I'm going to take for the caution light. You can see the setup here. The notch or the other piece goes to the back, and then this is set up like so. However, this doesn't quite fit. It looks like there's a little bit of a mold issue. So with that in mind, what I'm going to do is just go in and kind of clean it up on both sides to make sure that this will fit. Again, assuming that the instructions are correct, but that's how this appears to be on the instructions. So, just got to get that to fit in there without destroying the model part. And it looks like it might be just a little bit too long, so I got to go from this side here and this side here. Now, it could be that it was a molding issue, or it could be that it just isn't engineered very well, but either way, we've got to deal with it so that we can get this set up right. So again, I'm putting the narrower end forward. I'm putting the notch backwards. And now at least it's kind of fitting in there. Yeah, I'm not too thrilled with how this is working out. I figured that this would be better considering the setup for the rest of the kit. But, you know, everything can't be perfect, I guess. So just slowly clean away little bits here and there. This time I'm going to put some glue, see if that doesn't give me the final amount of push to get what I want, making sure the notch is in the back and the narrow part is in the front, and yeah, it slid right on, so it just needed a little bit more coercion as far as material being removed. And now I've got this part, at least, if I can get it to stay on now, glued and secured. And this then, I'm going to put that down for right now, attaches to the back of the truck. Even though it shows you here, you're going to want to dry fit it. Right there. And I would suggest putting this on first so that when we deal with the photo etch of the roof later, we know exactly where this fits and how this is going to affect the fit of the roof. And that's why the notch goes to the back, so to speak, because it fits right on there, and that actually fit in there very nicely. Not gonna complain at all about that. Other than to make sure that it is indeed straight up and down and that all parts are glued. Okay, I feel confident about that. So next I want to do the outside portion of the air conditioner. Now in this case, just because of the way this is set up, I want to put these two pieces together first, like so, and then I'll add the photo etch screen and double check and make sure it fits and all that. just because I want to make sure that there isn't going to be an issue with putting the screen in with this top piece not on there and then it not fitting properly or having some sort of issue that way. So I like to do that first. That's rock solid. Now I'm going to take the screen, and as I was kind of worried about, it seems like there's a little bit of give, or I'm sorry, not give, a little bit of constriction on one side or the other. So what I'm going to end up doing, because it was attached at the two ends, it could be little bits of leftover metal, like, I guess they're not really screw gates, but they're attachment points. So I'm just filing down both sides, because it's not an up and top and bottom problem, it's the side to side parts. Even though I went through and I trimmed this up really well. Now if you do get some of the metal bending because of this, like there, just keep an eye on it, bend it back if you want. In this case, I did that. This one as well. Just because I want to have it look nice. Put it in, yep, and that was it. A little bit of pushing down on it, got it taken care of. Now, I want this to lay nice and flat when I put this on, so I got to make sure that when I'm looking at it from the front that it's nice and flat. I want to put this piece in place like that, and then I'm going to flood it with some glue. Let that capillary action carry it around, start getting it set up, start sticking it to it. Now, this will, and I know I've talked about it before, but I'm going to talk about it again. This will help to soften the plastic and attach the metal to the plastic. It will attach to a degree, but it will not keep it there forever like if you had used, in my case, the black super glue. However, this is not going to be in a high use point. That's what I'll call it. So it's not like I'm going to be poking it or moving it or smacking it or something. And so I'm happy with that. And then when I prime it, it'll actually prime pretty well. Now I'm going to test fit this plastic piece while that's still wet and mobile with this, just to make sure everything is fine. There's no impeding, and lo and behold, no problems whatsoever. It looks really good. I'm not going to attach that now, but now I'm going to let this sit and dry. This is also going to sit and dry, and as noted in the instructions here, you have two options for clear parts, which are located here and here, depending on which kind of lens you want to use. I don't know the difference at this point. Maybe by the end of this series, I'll have looked it up and hopefully found out what each light means. Not 100% sure that that's going to happen, but I will give it a shot. So regardless, I'm not attaching these at this point. Now, dealing with the photo etch. Let's tackle the roof first, because this, in my opinion, is going to be one of the hardest pieces. You have two bends to do per side. One is to take this nice shiny piece right here and bend it down about roughly 45 degrees. The harder part is on the very edge. You've got to tilt that up about 200 degrees. And as you can see, this is bigger than my entire bender. So what I'm going to do is set this up on one side like so, just for the bender. And and then lift it up. Now, I'm not expecting that this is going to lift the whole thing, but I want it to at least get it started, and it shouldn't bend incorrectly when I get to the second part, meaning it shouldn't cause too many problems. However, this does not want to bend. This is fighting me. So when you do this, it may fight you too. And that's just to get it to that point. Now, to fix this little divot in the middle, I'm going to lift this up as much as I can so I can push this in, tighten it up. Hopefully that will, yeah, that started. And it's just using the photo etch bender as a tool to help get this. Now that it's bent a little bit, it seems like it's bending better. I've got a much nicer bend there, but to get that actual curve, like on there, I've got to bend it more. How am I going to do that? Well, that's where I take this photo etch piece, or the plate, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it on the edge. I'm going to put this in there like so. Actually, wrong direction. How do I do that? I mean, this is not an easy thing to figure out. I will say that right now. If I put it in like that, there's no more bending it forward. If I put it in like this, I need to bend it this way, which won't really help me. What I need to do is to put it in, somehow put it in like that so I can bend it more. Or put the whole piece in here like this so I could bend it forward. But I can't really do that at this point. I want to bend that more, not less. And I want to bend it, well, I'm going to go with this. So just putting it in like this, and then bending it as far forward as I can using this jig. Now, part of it is that there is a flat edge on there, and this is such a small piece that it probably just does not want to bend any more than it has to. It is difficult. And this is where having a larger photo etch bending tool would probably help. So I'm going to say that since I've got it and it is slightly over 90 degrees, that's good. So now I've got to bend this 45. And as you can see, this is way too big. And since I folded that, I can't go in. I should have folded the main piece first. So what am I going to do to deal with this? Well, that's where something like these forceps come into play. Thankfully, this is a larger piece. It's not going to give me a strictly flat bend in that spot, so I'm not thrilled with that, but it's still a solution, and ultimately it does look good. Right there, it's got a just a little too much of a bend, and then I can adjust it as needed. You know, make sure the top is still flat as you're adjusting this, because the metal, you can see it's bending a little bit, so you can kind of roll it back, and that will also adjust the shape of the or the angle in. So I'd say we're pretty close. So for right now, that's good. Now, what I want to do is show you how I could have done it with this. And the problems that come with then folding the little part. So I can do this and bend it, but then I'll have this and that'll be bent down, and I've got to bend against that larger bend. Now I'm going to do this just to show you what happens, but that's where I know that there's going to be a lot more pressure bending that small one than there is on bending this large one. And you know, the nice thing is that the big one here just goes with the flow right there all the way along the whole thing. So that's good. Now I've got to bend this all the way up like we had discussed before, and is this really going to work well, and how happy is it going to be with all that force being put on it. And I know that Hobby Boss did this because it makes this roof a lot more realistically thin, but you know, so the bending of it actually isn't too bad, except for, again, this edge over here. I will put this in. Trying my best to get that where it needs to bend. And unfortunately, the way that I'm looking at it right now, it's really hard to see where the lines are, because it reflects the side of the bender. There we go. And then, like with the other side, I will release it and I will clamp all of the side in to flatten it. Now, I know I've got this on the side, but I'm going to twist this back around. There we go. Because I'm finding that, at least with this, trying to straighten this out, that it tends to go in better overall when I've got a piece of metal underneath it. And it's fighting me to some extent. And instead of hiding this from everybody or zipping through it, I want you to see that, you know, anybody working with this photo etch stuff, it's a challenge. This is not easy for anybody. Everybody's got their tricks. Some people do better with this than others. But anyway, putting that on there, it's not 100% correct. These edges are not all the way up, but that's probably about as good as I can comfortably get it without having to resort to specialized tools. Now, like I said, if I had a larger photo etch bender, I could probably get the whole thing, but still with this flat edge that's in here, that's making it really hard. These really tight bends on the edges are just difficult to deal with. For right now, I'm going to call this good enough. Now, before I put these H22 pieces on the top, what I want to do, again, I'm going to put these off to the side. I know where they are and what they are. I'm going to put this on, and the larger squares of the roof, so to speak, go to the rear. And that's in place, that's in place, that's in place. Okay, there it is. That's all in place. Now I'm going to dry fit the roof on. And the thing about putting the roof on, how they show it, is while it goes on, there's no positive placement for it. It just goes on. So, to get this started, what I'm going to do is using my black super glue in the middle, away from the edges. I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to carefully put this on. Center it the way I think it needs to be centered on the part with the angles. And then I'm going to wait for this to set. Now, I'm removing the black super glue in the middle because that's where that's going to be attaching. I don't need any interference. I've got enough problems. So it's not exactly the cleanest, but that's how that goes on. So now that I've got that attached to it solidly, and this is something that'll help with gluing this on later, I can carefully remove it. There we go. And it is attached this way. And then I can work my way around in areas that are not going to be seen. So when I'm looking in the cab at these parts, some of this will be very visible, some of this will not. Like in the very back, I can put a very, very careful little seam, and I will put a little glue right there, and then see, this super glue doesn't crystallize like the other stuff, but it also doesn't run with capillary action like what we're more used to seeing. So keep that in mind when you're using it. And I also don't really want to, knowing how this is going to be pushed up against the back and in between and that, I don't really want a lot of stuff in there. So I may want to resort to regular super glue that has the capillary action, or maybe I'm more comfortable with the plastic glue, you know, your standard model glue, the liquid model glue. But for right now, even though it looks a little ugly, I'm putting the black super glue in there. Let that set a little bit. Now, I am curious, since we saw what it did before, I'm curious to see what the debonder does with the metal. So now that I've let that set a bit, I'm going to clean this up, put my debonder on here, and it is cleaning it up. As much as it can, anyway. And that's part of the problem with all these nooks and crannies and crevices and such, is getting them all to fit. Now, as you can see right here, that didn't quite go exactly how I wanted it to go. And I want this attached. I want this in the corner. I want this all solid. I don't want any weak spots. So I'm going to take my regular super glue, because this has to go on correctly, and I'm going to take my forceps And so what I want to do is kind of clamp this down, but in a way that the glue's not going to glue the parts directly to everything. And for whatever reason, even though I put the super glue in there, it didn't really want to hold. And I don't want to force anything out of alignment because I set this up with the way that things were in the middle. It's just not exactly matching up. So I'm going to run a little bit of glue from the back. This stuff is very, very thin, so I know it'll work right. The problem is it doesn't set very fast. Even though it's instant super glue, this stuff doesn't really set fast. So you gotta hold it and hope that your hands don't get capillary actioned up. I do have accelerator, but I only have 2 hands. So there. Put a little bit of accelerator on it. And hopefully that will not do anything at all. Just makes it a little more difficult. So once again, using the regular super glue with the capillary action, I'm going to come at it from this side. Let that get in there. Let that start working on it. This is a hard piece right here. I mean, this is just not going to be that easy to deal with. I'm going to come and do the front. Now this should be a little bit better because it should be more preformed. I don't know, better fitting. That's attached better. Now the sad part, or the downside, or whatever you want to call it, is that this will not hold very well. Shearing force, or side-to-side force, causes the super glue to let go fairly easily. You really only have pulling force, direct force down and off of it. But if I were to push it this way, that glue's going to let go pretty easily. So I've got to be more tender about this and decide how I'm going to do this so that I can get the security of holding this together. Do I want to add more black glue? So there's that. I'm going to double check real quick by putting it on the hoof here. And start with the front and kind of angle it in, and then work my way to the back. Right now it doesn't feel like everything's really lined up right, so it might be better to start from the back, get that in place, and then work to the front. Whatever works. And then you can look at the bend of the photo etch and decide, is that really the right angle? Do I want to change the angle at all? And overall, I think it looks pretty good in that regard. So now that I've got this set up, I'm going to use the black super glue to attach the 3, I'm going to call them tie downs for the roof. And they are pre-spotted, so it shouldn't be too big a deal. And I am not worried about a little extra glue on the roof for the super glue because it kind of helps it look like a bit of a weld bead. You have a little bit of work time with it, but not much. I mean, it's still super glue. So try and put them on as straight and level and square and plumb and all that as you can. Again. There's that one. Finally this one. And keep an eye on things like the railings on the sides, all the other details. Right now it looks okay, but this railing here actually looks like I may have bent it a little bit back. Just got to be careful with it. And finally, there's attaching this top piece, like so, right there. Now that those pieces there have dried, what I prefer to do, and what I'm going to start with is, put the frame out of the way here. I'm going to start with just plastic glue because there is room here for that. So I put it on the roof. Now I'm going to put it around the edge of the frame. Then I'll attach it, and if I find that I'm having issues in the future where it's popping off, having problems, whatever, then I may consider super gluing it on. But at this point, it's on and it's square, and what I will do then is take something with a little bit of weight on it, you know, some whatever, bottle of paint, just put it on top, and that will help to keep that set while it's on there. So there you have, aside from the clear parts, step 20. The only thing that we didn't do was attach the roof permanently, because you can see how hard it would be to paint the interior at this point without that. And we didn't add the clear piece to the back. We are taking the handy dandy highlighter to highlight what we didn't do once again, and we are going to, or I am going to, see if I can find out the difference between those two lights. Thanks for joining me, and we'll go on with step 21 next.